Welcome, everybody, to Spirit Matters, your daily Gita Bhakti Center podcast. I'm coming at you live from New York, and I am here with Kishore Chandra, who's been flaneuring around the rolling hillsides of Sicily for a little while. And then he hopped on over to Nashville, Tennessee, did a temporary country rock star stint to see if that was an alternative lifestyle he thought worth pursuing. Realized that didn't work and came back here to New York. I made the country rock star part up, but he did go to Nashville. And we're also here with Achyuta. Achyuta Gopi has arrived on the scene, and we're so glad to be with all you guys. We're smack dab in the middle, even coming towards the second part of the first chapter of the Gita. Before we roll into that, how are we doing? How are our tri-hosts doing? This is the first time three of us are together in a bit, in a hot second, as the kids say these days. I heard Pasha say that once.
It has been a minute.
It's been a minute.
I'm good. I'm happy to be back. I was, Dayal was saying I was in Sicily and I was also in Nashville. So a lot of traveling. And I realized I needed a lot of rest in between to just get back here. But I'm rested, I'm back, and I'm happy to be back. And I'm so happy to be here with you, Achyuta, and Dayal, and everyone else.
And I
I was bummed when it was just me.
No.
But now we're ready.
Definitely missed you.
How are you, Achyuta?
Still sheltered and protected.
Sheltered and protected. Achyuta Gopi's every week been having a new answer to the question, how are you? And this week it is sheltered and protected. Okay, shall we dive right into Bhagavad Gita?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I forget if we left off at verse 39 or it looks like we read verse 39, but maybe we didn't. I don't know. Do you remember, Chuta? With the destruction of the dynasty? It felt like we read that verse, but maybe that was just in my mind.
That was...
Maybe we can read it anyways just to give us context.
Yeah, we might have actually read 39. Because I remember we did two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we did 39. So we're at 40.
Verse 40. There's only 6 more verses in the chapter, so let's see where we get.
Let's do it.
You are our
Oh, that's right.
our dictator.
It's me.
Not dictator in terms of an evil ruler, but dictator in terms of you dictate to us.
I'd be happy if Achyuta was our dictator.
Achyuta for dictatorship.
Oh.
I'd be such a bad dictator.
Yeah.
And then I think I'd get like really comfortable with it, and then I'd be a really other bad dictator. Like I think I'd just one extreme to another.
And we would excuse all your transgressions because we're your friends.
Oh, thanks.
And it works for us.
Exactly.
Okay, text 40. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted. And from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. Kind of like how he's also like, he keeps on giving this idea of Krishna's own lineage. Like he keeps like going like further and further back. It's like, oh, descendant of Vrishni. It's like you've got this powerful lineage. You're really asking me to orphan all of these people? I had a friend recently, and she came and she said, she's like, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." She said, why is there always such an emphasis on like women everywhere I go in Vedic scriptures? I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, why like even in this verse, you know?" Like she's like, "Why is there such an emphasis?" And I was like, "Well, conversely, if there was no emphasis at all, I think we'd probably be really upset." And she's like, "But you know, is there an emphasis the other way?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, there is actually. I mean, every other verse that you're looking at, There's an emphasis on the masculine side of society, but here there's an emphasis on the feminine side of society. And you don't have to take it in a negative connotation. Arjuna is actually looking at this situation and thinking, I'm going to rip people's families apart.
Mm.
And then I'm going to leave all of these people without their shelter. Vedic relationships were so in depth. There were codes of conduct. There were all kinds of things that you couldn't even, like, you couldn't even say to somebody, you couldn't even look at somebody a certain way. And here Arjuna is saying, I'm about to be the cause of destroying all of that. Everything I've learned, you're now asking me, Krishna, wonderful uplifter of families, to rip them apart and leave them without any recourse or shelter. Even if they come to Yudhishthira Maharaj as the king after for a support, governmental support. There were 600 million people killed in this battle. Like, how are we supposed to shelter and support all of these people? So Arjuna's looking around at this entire array and thinking, this is somebody's family member. This is somebody's beloved child, father, brother, uncle, nephew, son, whatever the case may be. And he's thinking, this is righteousness for me to decide that I can irrevocably change their existence forever.
Wait, coming out from the previous verse, thank you, Chuta, of the word used here in this verse and the last word. I mean, the translation is irreligion, but the Sanskrit is adharma. And there's two types of dharma. There's a Sanatan dharma, which is the understanding of our spiritual identity and spiritual reality, which Krishna will start to elaborate on in the next chapter. And then there's what's referred to in the third chapters, and he mentions it also in the second chapter, this idea of swadharma, means like our duties in this lifetime, and the idea that we're meant to carry out the duties in this lifetime with a greater, within the context of our eternal identity, within our Sanatan Dharma, within eternal spiritual truths and religion. And so, what we'll find in later chapters is this explanation about how we're meant to bring spiritual principles into all areas of our life, into how we parent, into how we love, how we go about our occupation or our work, how we spend our free time, how we pursue our goals and purposes in life, and etc. And you kind of have this general sense and idea that, like, this is my work life, this is my family life, this is my spiritual life, this, and all these compartmentalizations of our identity in our life. But what we're going to learn is that actually, like, an integrated life is when you bring spiritual principles into all of those things. And what Krishna is mentioning is that when the destruction of the dynasty, or when destruction of leadership, or the destruction of good examples is taken away, people forget, people lose sight about how to carry out their roles in a dharmic way. There's no dharma leading society, and you find it so much today about, like, where are the values that are guiding society, that are guiding people how to parent, how to love, how to treat people, etc., how to go about relationships, how to treat a woman. There's this great loss in that, and Krishna's saying that, I mean, we find it even today. I mean, even in in the ways that, in the patriarchal society that we live today, and the exploitation and oppression of women in society, we see it very apparently. And Krishna is saying that, Arjuna is making the case here that dharma is meant to, we have the idea of, like, protecting women, and the idea of that being offensive, and, like, who's to assume that women need the protection of a man, which can be quite demeaning and derogatory. And at the same time, we recognize that there's, even today, with a lack of dharmic principles in society, women get exploited. Women get very, very, very exploited. And so Arjuna's worried about that. That when we lose sight of spiritual values, people's lower natures start to just lead the way, and it leads to this destruction of society by pulling families apart and by leaving women in a vulnerable position to be exploited.
Mm. In Srila Prabhupada's purport in this verse, I really like these words that he uses around that. Well, he uses it specifically in regards to women, but chastity and faithfulness.
Mm.
And it's so interesting to think, because I really like what you were saying, Dayal, about like adharma and dharma and how we don't have these values guiding our society and etc. Because it's so crazy to think that when you look at values like chastity and faithfulness, and you think about our current society, the majority of people think that that's like something of the old world, like that's like, why are we talking about chastity, like what is this, and I was hanging out with our dear friend Jai Jagannath, because I went to Nashville with him, and he and I are always joking about a lot of things. And I don't remember how we got into this conversation, but we were talking about our dear friend Janavi's wedding that all three of us were at. And a friend of ours was asking us, like, how was it? How was the wedding? And it was so hard to describe, because so many people felt and said the same thing, and we felt the same thing, that it almost felt like this celestial event, right? Like, it was just so beautiful and so amazing. And Jai Jagannath was just saying, like, man, like, society has really duped women, because like who doesn't want this like gorgeous celestial event? He was like, I want this. I myself, I'm like, yeah, I want this. I'm not going to have that, but I want this. And I think this idea of like conditioning people into thinking like what is right and what is wrong, when that's not based on spiritual values, when that's not based on dharma, when that's not based on ancient scripture, then what's it based on? It's just based on our own imaginations, right? Like, if we're looking at a lot of these kind of guiding principles or guiding values that are leading society or leading kind of like the cultural ethos, a lot of it is based on just like, like a rebellious spirit and imagination, and just like stuff that we just came up with. We're like, you know what? This is good. Let's do this. Let's try this out and see how it goes. And it's like, it's not going well, like it's not going well. I won't get too much into details, and I don't know why my mind is going to this, but like the whole monkeypox thing, if you read some of like the CDC guidelines of like what you shouldn't do, I'm just like, what? Like, how did we get here as a society? Like, what is this? Like, why isn't this common sense? Like, why do we need to be told like, don't do this, and maybe you should not, like, be with a cajillion people at once. Like, maybe that's a good idea to stop this virus from spreading. And I was just like reading all of this stuff. I'm like, how are we here? Like, how did we get here? And the answer is actually really simple, as Doyal has put. It's like, yeah, there's dharma and there's our dharma. And if our spiritual values, if our spirituality is compartmentalized into like, this is me when I'm spiritual, and over here I get to do all my nonsense. And if my spiritual values aren't coming, if they actually aren't coming into everything that I do, then it gets really messy, for lack of a better word.
I think society is not only duped to women; it's duped to everybody. Everybody's been kind of just like thrown into this situation where,
Mm.
because now the it's like the relationship goal is to be as unattached to the other person as humanly spiritually possible. And if you stick around long enough, you'll even see it in spiritual circles. It's like the most spiritual version is to give your entire self to the divine, and yet when it comes to other people, it's like, yeah, but that's a deep dark well of material entanglement. Like, that's not a thing. um And so I think that society has really duped people in general. And I think it's a symptom of this material world place. I want to say a symptom of the times, but I don't think it was just this one yuga, this one time frame. I think this is something that has been like ebbing and flowing, and the tides come up and then they recede a little bit, and then they come up and then they recede a little bit. And what I love is that even in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna will talk about among women, I am. And then he never says any particular names. It's all characteristics. It's all these like a really cool, amazing characteristics. And so I think that it's so important to, and we talked about this before, aligning our goals and our morals with something deeper than just society's flickering mental speculation of we think this is right now, because that is really subject to change at any moment.
Hmm.
And so when we start aligning our morals, why we are a good person, with something deeper than that, giving it a spiritual anchor, and a really inherently deep spiritual anchor, not just like, when the people are like, look, I'm a good person because God says you're going to hell. When we really align it with, but everybody is a part and parcel of this supreme divine being, and we start anchoring it there, it gets a much longer lasting effect. We are able to keep our morals and our ideas of being a good person, or our ideas of being a good partner, much longer than if we just align it with this is how I'm feeling today.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Should we read the next verse?
Let's do it. An increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performances for offering them food and water are entirely stopped.
Hmm.
Guess we can do both. By the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children, all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated.
Hmm. What I'm getting overall, and we can keep reading, or we just got a few minutes left. Um, what I'm seeing here is the emphasis and the importance of family. And we have this, the family unit, the idea of the nuclear family and the extended family, um, and and almost like this societal need to protect families. um, and we have this, I just spent a lot of time in learning social work in school, and the idea of how 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 we talk, like how, and at this time Arjuna was like, we have a responsibility, like society begins at the family level is basically what I'm saying. Society begins at the family level. Like, as an example, we at the Bhakti Center are starting to partner with schools in New York, public schools, to bring plant-based meals and education to schools, because the mayor of New York is a vegan. He's instituted plant-based Fridays, vegan Fridays in schools in New York. Schools have no idea what to do because they are used to, heating up mac and cheese and serving it out on a tray. And when it comes to vegan, you don't get vegan mac and cheese that you can heat up and serve out on a tray. So it becomes a difficult thing. Like, what do we feed these kids? And so, we're trying to partner with schools to provide like healthy, nourishing plant-based meals, as well as educate people about like plant-based lifestyles and yoga principles and whatever it might be. And we're realizing, like, unless we're also involving the parents in this conversation, it doesn't matter. you know you can feed kids something at school and the parents are like, why are you eating that crap, and blah blah blah, and if there's not an alignment, because And that's why I think the education system in America struggles so deeply. One, because we don't value it. I mean, there was a one of my favorite comedian skits is Key and Peele, and they had this one of their skits was Teaching Center, and it was like a play on Sports Center. You have Sports Center, and you get all the football highlights and the basketball highlights and all the trade deals and the trade deadlines. And this person just got like a 5 year, $300 million extension. And so they have this skit. It's called Teaching Center, and it's about like instead of sports, it's focusing in on teachers, and they go like live highlights from like a classroom. See how that teacher they just corrected the student, but then they encouraged him in the same way, building confidence for them to go on and advance in their educational career. And here we're gonna go talk to Mrs. Mary, Parkinson, who just nailed a $300 million extension at the unit at Highland Park Elementary School in Chicago. And it's like this whole thing about how and my father, he grew up, he was a humble position, earned just barely getting by as a professional football player. But I made something of myself, became a teacher. And it was like this whole kind of skit about like if we valued teachers the way we valued certain other roles in life. So that's one of the reasons why school systems struggle. But the other one is that it's very disconnected from the ideas of how we are partnering with families to build family values and to raise and teach kids. And so just what I'm appreciating here is this it's almost kind of like in Arjuna's worry and concern, you understand what he and leadership in society valued at that time, how much they valued family, and how much they valued the role that women played in society, and how much they valued protecting families, because everything from society, the family unit to the city unit to the state unit to the government unit, it kind of like that systemic foundation begins there.
What's amazing is I was just thinking as you were talking, and sometimes I like to take all the majesty away, right? Take all
Mm,
the awe and the reverence, and just think about these two guys having this conversation. And Arjuna's like, but you know, and rightfully so, exactly as you said, he's like, but family is the most important thing, and all of this stuff. Like, if I destroy these people's families, what's gonna happen? And I just know Krishna's standing there like, where was the love for family when they tried to kill you when you were little? Like, you do realize that that is your direct family, and they tried to poison your brother when he was 7,
mm,
and then they threw him in a river. They're like, where was the protection of women when they tried to burn your mother alive in a house that they made specifically to burn down? Like, where was the protection of women when they dragged your wife into a courtroom, tried to disrobe her, and called her every unmentionable thing that they could have ever called somebody? He's like, yeah, I get it. This is the ideal society. No problem. Where was any of that? He's like, you
mm,
if you leave this in the hands of them, what does that say for the rest of the protection of everybody else? This is how they treated
mm,
their family. You think they're going to treat everybody else better? And
mm,
so, like, there's such an interesting like dynamic with this push and this pull, and Arjuna's really having this breakdown, and I really feel like Krishna's like, I'm over it. He's so over it. He had been over it years before. He was over these people. And it's kind of nice to know that God can also be over it.
mm.
Like, even the
Well,
supreme person, like, gets a little over it.
well, as we mentioned in a previous discussion, also the idea of, because we're talking so much about family, and at the same time, we've talked about the strength of standing up to family, even when it's needed. Arjuna is being called to like do what's right, even if it means going against what's happening in your family, and standing up at times, and letting dharma be the ultimate principle, because it's the word that's being used often here. And so it's like you recognize that you're so worried about family, but it's your very family that's causing so much problems in society. And so you have it becomes sometimes you have to it's murky. Mr. Murky to say it the least.
Mm.
Um, and so and that's why it's tricky. And that's why we have the Bhagavad Gita, and that's why we're here. Um, we
Kishore,
are.
something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Kishore's
that
gonna say something.
it was really interesting that you brought that up, Achita, because as you were saying that, I was just like, yeah, oh my God. Because I think what it really comes down to is just like our values and how much we stand by them or don't stand by them. And it's nice to have high ideals, but it's also really important to like know who I am and where I'm at. And if I can actually follow through with those ideals, like, do I actually believe those ideals? And if I do, like, what am I doing to follow through on that? Because if we look at modern society, like, there's a lot of high ideals. There's a lot of high ideals on all fronts of how it should be. And, there's different sides thinking, no, this is how it should be, and this is how it should be, and this is how it should be. But at the end of the day, it's like, is what is there kindness in your heart? At the end of the day, like, are you treating your enemy with kindness? At the end of the day, um are you're following your values behind closed doors? And the answer most likely is no, right? And that's why we're kind of in the situation that we're in. So I really love that you brought up that point, Achita, because I think what then, oh yeah, this is what I was going to say. What then comes after this is that Arjuna kind of realizes that for himself. Like, he realizes that he's getting himself into kind of like a spiral of just not making much sense, because it's just a lot of counterintuitive arguments that he's giving. And what comes for the rest of the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna teaching Arjuna, like, hey, okay, like, this is what you got to do, actually. Like, this is the path. This is the truth. And so I think that sometimes, even when we have an idea of what we think it's right, it's always important to ask ourselves, like, well, where did I get that idea from? Or why do I think it's right? And am I even doing it? Is this even like sustainable or compatible with me? A lot of times I think we just accept things as a given, and it's not great. So thank you for bringing that up, Achita.
Haribol, Haribol. We are at our time. Thank you so much, Kishore. And we want to hear some takeaways from Kimberly. Or take her away. Or
Today we're taking away that everyone is a part and parcel of a supreme divine being, and to practice integrating our spiritual values to all aspects of our lives, and that society begins at the family level.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And what are you two walking away with over there?
Consider the source.
Consider the source. It's a big one.
I'm walking away with the idea of faithfulness, but not just of like faith. What is faith? Like, what is it really? And do I practice it?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am walking away with making sure that my actions express my values. Because we say we value a lot of things, but then it doesn't always show up in the ways that we live our life. And so for me, making sure those two things fit together. Thank you guys all so much. We love you tremendously. We're grateful for you. We're glad that you are here. We will see you tomorrow, same time, same place. And we hope that you have a great and wonderful day wherever you're at. Bye-bye. Thank you.